Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for Culturati Live. I'm Misty Wild, and it is a real pleasure to have you with us today. Culturati is a community of leaders exploring how we build stronger workplaces and more thoughtful leadership. And today's question is both timely and practical. How do we develop business judgment for the age of AI? AI can deliver information, analysis, and recommendations almost instantly, but leaders still have to decide what matters, what to pursue, how to weigh competing priorities, and how to lead through uncertainty. That makes judgment and how we develop it increasingly important. I'm especially grateful to be joined by three leaders who bring distinct and complementary perspectives to that challenge. Bjorn Billhardt is CEO of Ability, a leadership development company that uses business simulations and applied learning to build business acumen and management skills. Ability has reached more than 100,000 learners in 50 countries, and Bjorn is also co-author of the 12-week MBA. Alexis Stokes is Dean of the Bill Mundy School of Business at St. Edward's University, where she is helping shape how business education prepares leaders for a rapidly changing world. She has taught thousands of undergraduate and graduate students and brings deep experience spanning business education, law, leadership, and organizational strategy. And Kate Hogan, dear friend Kate Hogan, is Vice President of Learning and Development at Hagerty, where she leads learning, leadership development, and talent strategies that support the company's long-term goals. She brings more than 15 years of progressive experience at Hagerty and has helped build programs recognized nationally for both workplace culture and training excellence. Bjorn, Alexis, and Kate, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your perspective with us. And to everyone joining, we hope you'll make this a conversation. Please add your thoughts and questions in the chat as we go. Let's get started.
Well, hello, everyone. This is going to be a really, really interesting hour-long discussion here. Really excited to be joined with Dean Stokes from St. Edward's University and Kate, and really hoping that the next hour will be a highly interactive discussion. I've volunteered, for better or worse, to do a little bit of moderation here to start us off. But the hope is that this is not your typical moderated, here's a question, here's an answer, here's a question, here's an answer, but that this will be highly interactive, not just between the three of us. And I may have some opinions as well. This is how part of the deal. I may chime in as well, but not just a discussion between the three of us, but really also between you and the audience and us. I think we're entering a period of time where anyone that professes to be an expert in anything is sort of has to relearn what it actually means to be an expert. AI is changing so much of what we do on a daily basis. And 25 years in business, 25 years in learning, and 25 years in learning and development. I haven't seen anything like this, and like this change that we are facing right now. And so I think all three of us are coming at the question of what we need leaders to know, what schools need leaders to teach, and what actually leadership and business judgment looks like in this new world. We all three of us are coming at it from the perspective of curiosity and humility. But my hope is over the next hour, we'll be able to get a few nuggets across to the audience, and then also hopefully we'll learn from the audience as you participate in this interactive virtual fireside chat. So real quick, Missy, you did a great introduction. Anything else would like to add to the introduction? Maybe Kate and Dean Stokes, if you want to just go around for a few seconds, and then we'll start the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I can expand. As Misty said, I've been at Hagerty for quite some time. I like to say I grew up in the organization. For those of you not familiar about Hagerty, we are an automotive company that has its main product is insurance. So we do collectible type of insurance, but we have a broad set of experiences and products that expand beyond that, including events and auctions and media properties and different membership offerings for people who love cars. And we are, our business started in northern Michigan, Traverse City, Michigan, and we are now a global company that's publicly traded. And so I've had the privilege of being along for that ride.
Well, it's nice to meet you, Kate, and thank you, Bjorn. As Dean of the Bill Munday School of Business at St. Edward's University, I am bringing about 25 years of higher education experience to real challenges today in terms of how we prepare tomorrow's future business leaders. So I'm really excited about this conversation, and I'm excited to ground my part of the conversation in the values and liberal arts approach that St. Edward's has embraced for 141 years here in South Austin. And as we prepare Austin's workforce and beyond, really looking forward to this conversation as we all learn and grow together.
And real quick, Bjorn Billhardt and the CEO of Ability, we are an Austin-based leadership development company. Misty mentioned a lot already. Most importantly for this discussion, we have partnered with Dean Stokes and St. Edward's University on creating a certificate mini MBA program that sort of is a teaser to the actual St. Edward's MBA. And an incredible collaboration that involves not just Ability and St. Edwards, but also TED. So there's a very national and international reach through TED of this 12-week MBA program. So let's get started. Business judgment. Business judgment was a relatively easy thing to define before AI. But and it's changing what it actually means and the relevance of what we say or what we mean when we say business judgment. So let's actually maybe define the term, right? And maybe Kate, you can get us started. Like when you say business judgment, like what do we mean by that in the context of an organization? What are some of the decisions that are requiring that human judgment? And then we'll talk about how business judgment is changing in today's world.
Yeah, I think when I think about business judgment, I think it's about the ability to frame the right problem. I think it's about the ability to generate options and be clear on what is the value that whatever we're making a decision on is about. I think it's about understanding risks and trade-offs and understanding the ripple effect of your work and the decisions that you're making on behalf of the business.
I think that's very important. It's about trade-offs, and it's about a lot of it is about sequencing, right? Sometimes if there is the right decision, AI can give us the right decision, but business judgment is oftentimes, well, there are two right decisions. Which one should be sequenced first, right? So it's about and which one, what are the consequences beyond the next step? What are the consequences 3 steps down the line?
Mhm.
And we'll talk about in a second about where AI can and where AI cannot help. But Dean Stokes, how would you define business judgment and what it means?
Well, I agree certainly with Kate's textbook definition. And I would add to that business judgment requires the ability to distinguish the difference between what is really important and what is simply urgent or visible and, getting all the buzz. And those are two very different things. And I think something that probably all three of us in our daily work can appreciate, that sometimes what's right in front of you may not actually be the most important thing you have to spend your time on strategically. Certainly, understanding, I really appreciated the ripple effect comment, because certainly business judgment is about anticipating second order consequences and those unintended effects. It's the ability to see around corners. And that doesn't mean you always get it right. Business judgment is not about being right 100% of the time in the long term, but it is about that thoughtful ability to determine priorities and to imagine what all of the consequences of any potential option are.
And it is the one thing that when I ask Claude, I am not getting
Mhm.
yet. Maybe in 2 years, maybe in 3 years, but at this moment, it's actually striking how oftentimes, I'm sure all of you guys in the audience, I'm getting AI generated reports left and right these days. It's very pretty and it's very compelling, and the numbers all look really clear, right? But most of the time the AI doesn't see is, what are the ripple effects? If
Mhm.
these are the easy to see effects, but what are the things that like are not obvious? And I think that's where business judgment comes in. And interestingly enough, right, we all are thinking AI is going to take our jobs. It actually, like the jobs where business judgment is required, it may actually be that AI is not just not taking the jobs, but it's making those jobs a lot more important in the next
Mhm.
few years. So the big topic that we're going to talk about is how do you develop this type of business judgment for the HFA, right? And so we have, universities, we have in-house leadership development programs that, the programs that Kate are a part of. We do a lot of those. We have on-the-job training. So Kate, you worked at Hagerty for 22 years, so you've a
Mhm.
very long tenure at Hagerty. Um,
Mhm.
how did you develop business judgment as you grew in your career at Hagerty?
Yeah. Um, Early on, I had the advantage of having a leader who felt strongly about understanding the perspectives and the challenges of our stakeholders across the business. And so early on, my leader would have me tag along to meetings. In meetings and oftentimes in rooms that I really didn't have the experience, maybe, nor I wasn't necessarily contributing anything in particular to the meeting, but what I was there for is to learn and listen. And each
Mm,
time we would walk into the room, my leader would say, I really want you to pay attention to the perspective of maybe a couple different areas, because that's where we really need to better learn and understand how we can best support or design. And to help them move the business forward. So I think that was absolutely critical, not just going to the meeting, but understanding what I was supposed to be learning there. And then also too, asking for my perspective after we left the meeting and what did I learn and how did it apply to certain things that we were working on. And so, understanding that that was important early on in my tenure, I modeled that throughout my growth. I've always been one to, to reach out to my colleagues across the business and to participate in meetings and to sit alongside them and have them walk me through their business plan. I also think my leader gave me just enough rope. She
mm,
gave me the ability to make like low risk decisions early in my career that helped me understand where maybe I missed and what were the ripple effects or the the impacts of those mistakes or decisions, and then where were their successes and what was the long term impact of those. And so that rope slowly grew over time, but I think that was significant for me early in my career.
and giving you rope also means giving you the chance to fail, right? Which
Oh,
is right.
absolutely.
Rope is always easy to give when there's no chance of failure, but like rope, giving you rope and there's a chance of failure, that's the really hard part as a leader. So having a mentor, someone that you can learn from, that is willing to give you that grace is it's I hear this all the time, right? That type of apprenticeship is absolutely critical, right, for the development of business judgment. And it is interesting, actually, when you think about AI, and what AI actually is, right? It is trained on volumes and volumes of pages that we have written down. It is not trained as of yet on those human interactions, right? The kind of environment where a leader pulls you aside and says, "You see this little thing that didn't
Mhm.
seem to matter, but that actually is critical in this very scenario." Um, those are the types of things that we don't tend to write down, right? We don't tend to have them in a book. And so AI is not trained on them. There's just, I think, why business judgment is one of those things where AI just fails us right now, right? It just doesn't see the second,
Mhm.
third generation effects. So it's an interesting thing to think about. Like AI gives us what the textbook would say. It cannot yet give us that apprenticeship. So I think that's one of the key elements of what we have to think about is to think about training people on business judgment. So, Dean Stokes, this is the next big question for you then, right? How do business schools think about giving people training that business judgment in a world where AI can spit out very confident answers that may or may not be, may or may not have the judgment.
It's a great question. And certainly, I think that developing business judgment needs to be the central organizing purpose of business education in this era. For decades, we got away, and I talk about this sort of generally in the academy, with teaching graduates to have how to access knowledge, to give them frameworks, to give them analytical techniques, to give them the ability to produce sophisticated work. But frankly, AI dramatically reduces the
Mhm.
scarcity of all of those capabilities. A student can now generate a competent market analysis, a financial interpretation, a presentation, strategic recommendation in seconds or maybe minutes. So, what remains scarce is what we have to focus on. And what remains scarce is really the ability to ask, is this analysis right? What is missing? What matters most? What should we actually do? What are the consequences if we're wrong? Am I willing to own this decision? And ultimately, the role of the business school is shifting from transferring knowledge to developing judgment. So, as I see it, business schools have a number of responsibilities. First, we've still got to teach the underlying disciplines because students need to know the fundamentals of accounting, finance, marketing, et cetera, to recognize when the AI gets it wrong. So, in some ways, AI actually increases the importance of foundational knowledge because someone who doesn't understand the domain can't reliably evaluate the machine learning. And second, of course, and perhaps most importantly, it's about teaching students how to frame problems. Kate referenced this earlier. AI is so good at answering well-specified questions, but figuring out what the question really is really the hardest part, and that's the part that is still very innately human. Third, I'd say we've got to create repeated opportunities to make decisions under uncertainty. This is a
Mhm.
place where St. Edward's really excels because we emphasize experiential learning in all of our programs, and we do real projects for real clients, which gives students those reps, right? It's like the quarterback who needs all the reps to practice to make the play. We do the same thing in our business school, and that allows students to make decisions and still a safe place where there's clearly no correct answer. Not all information is available, but they can get that practice in exercising and developing business judgment. Fourth, and I'll say this is really, I think, a hallmark of a liberal arts education like St. Edward's offers. We have to force students to defend their reasoning. Asking what would you do is important, but asking why and what assumptions are you making and what would have to be true for that recommendation to work, what evidence would cause you to change your mind. I think that's where the real learning occurs. And that is best done in environments where you have the personalized ability to teach and connect and really converse with students in a deep and real way, as opposed to just a passive learning environment or a large lecture, for example. Fifth, I'd say we have to let our students develop consequences and experience consequences. That is, I think, best done again through these experiential learning exercises that we embed in our curriculum. And then sixth, and this is where I have to pitch our St. Edward's mission, which is a Holy Cross institution, is to develop ethical judgment. That ethical and moral judgment is still where AI has a gap. AI is not able to substitute for that moral accountability that is so fundamental to business judgment and leadership. So in the business school environment, that's what we're focusing on at St. Ed's. And that's what I see colleagues across the country really wrestling with in terms of how do we, teach people to be better humans that can be better business decision makers. And that is still a place where AI lets us, as educators, play a strong role in that kind of formation of business development, business judgment, and strategy.
These are six fantastic points, and I know Misty's taking copious notes on the back end, or AI is at least. So I think those are really, really incredibly important points in terms of what business education today needs to do to prepare people for business judgment. And obviously, as an experiential learning company, all my entire life, I've developed business simulations and business competitions, and it's music to my ears to hear kind of the alignment that that type of learning, the learning by failing, the very similar, actually, Kate, to what you mentioned,
Mhm.
having having someone that brings you to the meeting and that gives you rope and lets you fail. That type of environment is what business schools, I think, have oftentimes provided, but that was more the okay. Well, that's the auxiliary component, right? The real component is you have to learn the formula, right? You have to learn the facts, and it does seem like AI is creating some shift there, Dean Stokes, if I hear you correctly, um, from here's the knowledge, right? Like you need this knowledge, and now maybe practice it a little bit. To AI will give you the knowledge. What is it that the data is telling you, and how do you ask the better question once you have the data? So fantastic, and we are getting some audience participation here. I'm going to call on Vaishali here, audience member who's starting to participate in the discussion. And so I encourage all of you listening in here on the audience, give us your hardest question. Um, any insight you have, please put it in the chat. We're going to monitor this chat here as we go along, because we are all feeling our way into this new world as we think about what is it that we really need to teach in terms of business judgment to create better leaders of the future. So Vaishali here had a great point, right? Like it's around like it's around intentionality, right? Like when you have a mentor that brings you to a room, like the great mentors, they tell you before you walk in the room, here's what you should watch for. Here are the things that you will learn when you get into the room. And it's that type of apprenticeship, Kate, you talked about that earlier, that allows you to build the judgment that will later on allow you to make the right calls. And then I think the Stokes, you touched on kind of ethical reasoning and moral judgments as a key point. Especially when AI can give you the easy answers, right? AI can say, well, this project has a positive NPV. What it can tell you is it the right project to do in the first place, right? What are the consequences on stakeholders that may not be present at the table? So I think there's a really, really important point there in terms of what we should be teaching. So maybe just kind of talk a little bit about the value of the MBA in particular. So I think we're all in agreement, and Dean Stokes, I heard you say liberal arts education, which is something that St. Edward's does so well, and that I'm a liberal arts graduate myself, so the connection to the big picture that you get when you study the Odyssey and then other ancient texts, it's becoming so apparent that is a critical skill. But let's talk specifically maybe about the MBA and what the MBA should provide to students, what it should not. What are some of the things where things are changing. So Kate, when you see an MBA on a resume today, so when you're interviewing, what do you believe about that person that you wouldn't otherwise? And is anything changing about that perception?
I don't think much has changed about that perception currently. I would say I think about it exactly how Dean Stokes has expressed it. Like they've done the work. They have a foundational understanding around core aspects of business, whether it be finance, marketing, HR, and they've learned a lot of different models and have practice in a controlled environment, the application of those. And again, in a controlled environment, making decisions and working with colleagues, different backgrounds, all of that matters significantly. And I think that that's an advantage when someone joins an organization, and their ability to have that foundation when they come in. I think where there's advantages at times from promoting from within, and we put a lot of emphasis in career progression through the organization, is that those individuals through Hagerty, as I like to say, have done the reps. They've learned over time through different roles about how about critical, again, foundational elements about how we do business, but also what we care about. And I think when someone joins the organization and has such a degree as an MBA, the work for them is then really about understanding our unique business model and
Mm,
how what they learned applies to it. For us, it's critical that they understand our members and our customers. And that is a big driver and it's a unique aspect. And we go to great lengths to teach people about that, regardless of the role that they're coming into. But also, too, that they understand our brand and they understand our culture and our values. And that's kind of our, operating model, I would say, internally that really, really influences someone's effectiveness specifically here.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Shaquille, yeah, says what we care about, right? Like that's the key phrase, right? Like, and it is so interesting. One of the one of the key lessons that I've learned in business school is that there even when you look at financial numbers, there isn't a right or wrong answer. Like engineering, there's typically a right answer. It's like the bridge either collapses or it doesn't, right? Like it either is load bearing or it's not. Like and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know if that's so don't judge me for those analogies. But in business, oftentimes it's not. It's about trade-offs, right? A company that is focused on growth, you may have a perfect project that's focused on saving money and profitability, and you come to the executives and you pitch it and you get crickets. And you're like, why? This is ROI positive. I'm making money for the company. And, it's only later with business judgment that you learn, well, the executives weren't focused on it. The executives were focused on growth, right? And there's a trade-off between growth and profitability. And so it's oftentimes in these gray areas where it's like, well, the numbers should show you what the right answer is, but they don't. It's in that area where I think that's what MBAs should have a better and more nuanced understanding of how the numbers correlate to each other, right? And that's, I think, one of the key things Dean Stokes that I know St. Edwards is focused on in terms of the business judgment, and that we when I think about like what is it that you're actually learning, it's not just the textbook numbers. It is really putting them into context. And then Shaquille's point, it is then connecting that to what the company cares about, and then at an MBA level, understanding what those key metrics are that a company cares about, and then connecting the dots so that the decisions are aligned to that. Yeah, Dean Stokes, any other reflections on that question? Like is there anything changing about the perception of what people expect from someone that has an MBA title?
That's a great question, Bjorn. And I spent a lot of time this summer in pretty deep conversations with industry thought leaders across Austin and beyond. And what I heard repeatedly from really the top minds in business in our ecosystem is that they're no longer hiring based on skills. Yes, being able to do some basic things from day one on the job so you're career ready, that remains important. And we do that too at St. Edwards, making sure our students are, have some sense of what to do on their first day at work. But they're not really hiring on skills. They're hiring based on human character traits. And that really resonated with me because I
Mm,
think there's been so much push throughout the United States in the past few years to focus on skills-based education. And as you put it,
mm,
Bjorn, like if you're in engineering, I mean, those skills are hard skills. They are absolutely fundamental and have to be learned and taught and practiced. But in business, when we are thinking about hiring and preparing students for the future, not just the next 5 years, but the next 50, which is what keeps me up at night, quite literally. It's about how do we teach our students to be intellectually curious? How do we teach them
mm,
to be agile and creative and proactive? And how do we teach them to take moral accountability and responsibility for their decisions? Ideally, that foundation's been laid, through 18, 24, 30 years of life and hopefully family preparation in many cases. But we know that in higher ed, and especially at the MBA level, to the extent that students just think they're going to come in and learn a bunch of formulas and be done and check the box on their MBA, that's not really adding a lot of value to anybody, not to them, not to their careers, not to their future employers. And so from my perspective, yes, teaching all the models still matters. We have to do that. We have to have people who can explain the why behind the models and the why behind the data and the output that AI spits out. But really, we've had to evolve from the traditional model of, deliver a bunch of content, encourage the students to analyze it, produce an answer, and grade it. Because AI can really do all of that work. So we've evolved to a model of, how do we help students understand? How do we encourage them to interrogate and question, defend or make decisions, then defend that decision and experience consequences, reflect and decide again. And that's the feedback loop. That's the learning loop that we're trying to embed in what we're doing at St. Edward's. And I know my colleagues across the country are doing the same. And again, it does require a very different approach to learning.
Mhm.
And so I think MBAs, although MBAs, I think good MBA programs have always been highly experiential, and that should be a hallmark of any quality MBA program. It's more important now than ever that our students are really getting the benefit of the opportunity to try and fail and reflect and try again, and with some sense of the consequences of that. And that is, again, I think, where projects that you're doing for real clients, or at least really good simulations like Ability produces, can be so formative for the students. I will say also that this has required a lot of mindset change on the part of faculty. And I just want to give a shout out to all the faculty across the country who are wrestling with this new world and trying to figure out how to adapt, because they're no longer content deliverers. That's not really the point anymore, but it's about helping that they have to essentially design difficult decision environments and question assumptions and coach and challenge and evaluate and facilitate reflections. And that is a new world for faculty too. So we're working really hard in higher ed to try to create, again, fully formed humans who can then go into workplaces like Kate's and learn what matters and learn the values and the culture, and be strong contributors. But I'm looking at it in terms of how are we preparing students, MBA students in particular, for success 50 years out, and not just the first job. So that's the challenge before us.
Yeah, and Robert here says it quite wisely. Human skills emerge as more important than ever, and it is in the experiential learning that you can hone your skills in that area. And it is really interesting when you think about, the MBA oftentimes gets like, well, there's a law degree, there's a medical degree, there's a business degree, but in the end, it's a very different degree than a law degree and a medical degree, right? Like you would never have a doctor that you would want to operate on you without a 7 years of like in the classroom, right? Because there's a body of knowledge that you need as a doctor. There's a huge body of knowledge you need as a lawyer. The MBA is a lot more about the judgment, and as Robert just pointed out, like about some of the human skills like that are now emerging as more important than ever. So it is a slightly different degree that has always been a little bit less about knowledge, but as AI is spitting out all the answers that you want, but maybe very less of the judgment, it is becoming even more so important to have the focus of any good MBA program be around creating the conditions so people can practice their judgment.
Yeah.
And as
I also just wanted to say too, I love the emphasis on ethics and curiosity and of course decision making. And I think one of the other things is, I think I heard you say, is just being good learners, and being, I think somebody maybe commented in the chat, and being a learner for life. One of the skills, I guess I would say, or competencies that we've been talking a lot about here is learning agility. And how do you become a really good learner? And this is at all levels of our organization, but in particular, some of our people who are on the front lines, who are often, the first to have to be absorbing all the different changes that are coming at them. And we talk a lot about, we're a high growth company. We're implementing a lot of new things and systems and products to our teams, and they're absorbing a lot. And at times that seems like a burden. At times, it seems like a lot to them. But what we've been talking about, I would say definitely over the last year, is that you've developed a muscle to be able to learn on the fly by having this constant kind of change coming at you. And that is a skill. And that is something that makes you, relevant in where we're going as a business. And so we continue to talk about that. We continue to recognize and reward those types of behaviors. I think it, goes back to also like, hiring for character, maybe. Those are the things that I think is going to make somebody successful, regardless of the role in a modern organization in the face of AI.
And I reinforced that, Kate, in a conversation I had just this summer with a very large tech company. They said the number one differentiator between employees who will thrive in their organization for many years, if not decades, and those who will likely be out in 3 to 5 years is the lifelong learning and ability to be agile. And that's what they're looking for in hiring, because they know that those are the people that can really grow and learn and evolve even on a very quick basis. And so completely appreciate that reinforcement of what we're hearing too.
We're getting more audience participation here. So, Vaishali and Robert, thank you. Actually, Robert, that's a really interesting question. Maybe Kate, we'll put you on the spot here. If this is all true, right, then should we reward? I mean, should we put monetary incentives for character along with achievement? Is that even possible, right? Because if the actual behaviors that we're looking for, right, like you get what you reward, right? Like, is there a way to reward that? How do we do that? And because it does require also human judgment. So any thoughts on that? That's a really hard question, Robert. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do that to a certain extent right now. When we evaluate performance, we evaluate it through two different lenses. We look at it from, did you accomplish what you set forward? Did you accomplish your goals? And did they have the impact that was intended? The other piece that we also evaluate is how did you go about that? And the how did you go about that is really about the character piece. It's really about, how I worked with my colleagues across the organization, how I, made decisions in real time and understanding my biases and my, and recognizing decisiveness. All of those things are also evaluated in the overall picture of somebody's performance. And so, and they're all tied directly back to our corporate values.
That's a really astute point, and it is really important to emphasize as well that like, what are the criteria, and that the values play a huge role in the what really matters in the corporate world, the promotions, it's not just that you've achieved something, but it's how you've achieved something. And I'll give a shout out to one of the simulations that was designed originally by Stephen Tomlinson, as Eugene's amazing husband. In that simulation, it is oftentimes where at the end a board of directors doesn't give the winning team doesn't award the winning team to the team that has the highest revenue, because a lot of times in the simulation, how they achieved it was actually not the right way. And that conversation, and having a board of directors that kind of in a simulated environment denies the first place, if you will, to a team that has officially achieved the highest revenue, jars a lot of the people, a lot of the students, right? A lot of people go into an MBA program going, well, it's all about just making the money, right? Like that's what we're here for, right? And that's all that counts. And then when they realize that in the real world, board of directors actually look beyond that, it's eye-opening sometimes for students. And I think that maybe one of the things regardless of AI or not, that where universities have started to shift some of the way we train and teach, that we can't just say this is not we're not in a football game here, right? Like where there's a score and the revenue is the score and that's it, right? It's how you achieve the revenue that matters. And that's actually oftentimes the nuance that, you know, early career professionals don't have as much of an insight into, and the MBA can really help with accelerating that type of understanding. Um, so yeah, Robert, and according to Simon Sinek, culture trumps everything, right? And a lot of what is a lot of how you achieve things is, it's different company by company because company cultures differ, right? How you achieve things at Dell, what gets rewarded in terms of how you achieve at Dell is probably very different than at Hagerty. Um, so let's see here. Eugene, let's love the second dimension. How did you go about it in accomplishing KPIs? Now I forget exactly what you talked about there, but if anyone remembers, who would like to tackle Eugene's question there? And if not, Eugene, we may have to put you on mute and ask the question again. It wasn't a question. Okay, sorry. So let's go to some of the other harder things um, that that I think the AI change is opening up in terms of questions, right? So uh, there is already, and there probably will continue to be a lot more resistance against AI. And we see this already. And actually, Dean Stokes maybe can talk a little bit about students at St. Edward's and how their feelings are. That, I assume in this audience, there aren't that many people who are in their early 20s. And I do know from at least my kids that there are different feelings about how AI is influencing their world. So let's talk a little bit about that resistance, right? I guess we're looking at, okay, we need to shift how we teach business judgment, and AI is going to take all, improve all of our jobs. Well, there are some folks that are like, I'm not ever going to use AI. What are you seeing on campus right now, Dean Stokes, and how are people adapting?
That's a very timely question because literally just this morning I started my day at 8 a.m. with a graduate student, who said, I do not want to have to use any large language models in this graduate program. And the program is an analytics program, which, machine learning tools have been used in business analytics for decades. That's not even new, right? And so we had to have a conversation with the student about what AI really looks like in terms of business analytics and skill building and the tools that we use and the tools that that student will be expected to use when they go out into the workplace and have that conversation. There are students who have some really legitimate ethical and environmental concerns with AI. And I see that, I've got 3 teenagers myself. This generation is deeply concerned about the future of the planet, the world, humanity, and they're deep thinkers. And so, those concerns have to be heard and addressed. It can't just be AI is here to stay, deal with it. We need to have real conversations about what that looks like in terms of sustainability. And I think all be part of that conversation. We also know that there's just real fear about what the world's going to look like. The jobs that they grew up thinking would be there for them may or may not be. And frankly, most of the jobs they'll have in 20 or 30 years probably don't exist yet. And so that's just scary for any young adult. And we're certainly having those conversations daily here at St. Ed's. Other students, of course, these are students who are digital natives, so they embrace it. Some students misuse it. And so we're having all of those conversations about how AI can be a productive and ethical tool, but also, where the need for real human learning and human experience comes in. And also trying to provide some reassurance that the world has always changed. And although this is incredibly rapid change, even by, historical standards, that there will continue to be a place for humanity and for their very human abilities and character and values. So it's a tough conversation, but yeah, literally just had it again 8 a.m. this morning.
Mm, yeah. And Sunshine is making a great comment. It's critical that students do gain that experience with AI, right? Because they'll come out of their undergrad or MBA program, and they're going to be thrown into a workforce where they get an AI report and they have to figure out like, is this real? Is this not? What questions do I need to ask? And then they're going to be thrown at, okay, now prepare this 10-page report, and they're like, what how should I even prompt this? So yeah.
And
Hey, do
that's
you
why.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was just one last thought. That's why we are truly embracing AI tools at St. Edward's that can not only enhance productivity, but that can complement human ingenuity in terms of leading us to better, data-driven decisions. And
Yeah.
we're working really hard to embed AI literacy and critical thinking into every single course in the business school. So it's something that we're not shying away from, but it still requires conversations with students to put it in context.
Mm. Hey, do you want to add something?
I would agree. I just, as far as sentiments, maybe from some of our younger team members about ethics around AI and both environmental and um, the broader global impact of roles and people and humanity as a whole. I think they're a very conscious generation, which I'm inspired by and encouraged by. Um, I think also too, one of the things that we're recognizing is that there is a lot of agency, I guess I would say, at a really individual contributor level in our organization with AI, meaning individuals are given the decision-making authority to approve certain outputs of AI. And that comes with great responsibility. And many of them, this would be a new responsibility for them. So how are we preparing them to think critically about that output, to ensure and understand its assumptions before that they are then passing it on to their leader and then their leader? So this is in the flow of work, this is a brand new, I would say, responsibility for people that we are recognizing, where we need to support individuals in those types of roles, because that is changing quite dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that actually does tie a little bit back into some of the things we talked about earlier about the value of the MBA and like what and then why it's even more important to actually for people to get that seasoning, right? Not necessarily knowledge, but the seasoning, because AI is going to throw a ton of things at them with high confidence. And one of the things that I have always felt is like what you're getting, I think, with any degree, but I think is in particular with a business degree and with business education is not not some detailed knowledge, but some frameworks. But most importantly, you're gaining confidence, and you're gaining confidence because you've seen things before, right? You've seen something play out in a different context, right? You've seen what happens, and so that's why experiential learning is, at least, is near and dear to my heart, right? But you've seen in different contexts what can happen when certain decisions are made, right? That's why the Harvard Business School case study is so effective, right? And why so much of the business school classroom is active discussion, right? Instead of reading and lecture. Um, and in those discussions, you get to then experience in different contexts how decisions play out, and that gives you the confidence. And I think in a world where AI is going to throw more and more highly confident data and metrics at people, it I think is probably even more so than anything else. Is just the confidence that you've seen something like this before and you can evaluate it. Uh, so here's some great additional questions. One of the key questions for the emerging business leaders: how does a business leader ensure that AI ambition is grounded in clearly defined business problems while still enabling disciplined explanation of AI's transformational potential? That's a very good. I love hard questions. So anyone want to tackle that one from
I,
Robert?
I, I think I have seen this in real time. I appreciate the AI ambition and the the curiosity and the expectation that we are using this as a thinking tool and a strategy creation tool. And the balance between and understanding how to use the tool and the expectations within your business in a way that is really really moving strategy forward in a helpful way. So an example of this would be I've seen where maybe someone has been, I'll say maybe overly dependent on AI's recommendations, and they're bringing that to a strategy discussion. And the reality of what they've presented in its ability to be executed in the business, there's big gaps there.
Mm,
But in the moment, there's a piece where I empathize with that leader because there's a time pressure to it. They're being challenged to use the tool in thoughtful ways for execution. And so there's a lot of learning I think that's happening with that at the most senior levels of the business. So I've seen that kind of in action very recently, and trying to find the right balance of that.
yeah, yeah. And this is an incredibly important question. I'm going to take Robert's questions even one step further because I think the AI of today is the worst AI we'll ever see, right? And we are already seeing the beginnings of the even next generation of agentic AI, where right now we're asking questions of AI, right? And coders, they're starting to code in AI, but we haven't yet seen AI that does things more autonomously than that, right? Like here, we give AI a question and it collates a report. My guess is, and this is kind of left for discussion here. My guess is that in a year or two, we're going to start to see the first agentic AI that doesn't just write code, but that starts to really get into changing business processes, creating their own rules. If any of you have seen this incredibly scary post-mortem on the OpenAI security breach, it's an hour that is out of the worst sci-fi movie I've ever seen. These agentic AI agents that OpenAI were testing broke out of their cage, if you will. They found a way to communicate with each other. They started to say things to each other. It's like, oh wow, we found an exit. Oh wow, it's like this is we can now communicate with each other. And how about we try? This is not even part of our original scope. Let's go, but it could still help. So let's do it anyway. And those were like, I mean, that is science fiction that I am that scared me to death. But we may see some of that in the business world pretty soon, where AI is going to start to design processes, give tasks to humans. Right now, it's still we give the task to AI, it comes back to us. It's not going to be much longer until AI can get to that next level. And so the question is, um, how do we then, as humans who are still hopefully in charge for a while, how are we directing AI so that it is grounded in the problems that we solve? And I think again, that's some of the bigger questions here that are raised by Robert. Like, how do we ensure that we are clearly defining the problem and same problem? And I guess that does go back to that is what good business education should do, right? So that's
I'd argue
yeah.
yes. And I'm not smart enough to tell you how to train agentic AI in a more responsible way. That is definitely not my wheelhouse. But I can say it really just goes back to encouraging and building our students to be strong questioners, to be courageous. And I go back to this moral accountability, but also moral courage and asking the hard questions and knowing when to be patient and take a step back and say, just why. In high school debate, I won lots of tournaments just because in every cross-examination round, I would just say why over and over and over again until it couldn't be explained. Won every time. It was like a toddler. But really, we go back to those fundamentals that, those who question, those who are really careful, critical thinkers, can ensure that there are some guardrails on our use of AI. And that's again going back to the fundamental question of business judgment. That's what we're trying to develop in our students, both undergrad and graduate students. And that's what I know all of the L&D programs that you're providing are also emphasizing that ability to really be critical thinkers and to take all of this content, all of this information, and ask ultimately why. Because if we stop doing that, then I think we're in real trouble.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and maybe a partial answer already to the next question here for the host and panelists from the chat. Like, if you could redesign leadership development from scratch to an AI-enabled workplace, like what would you keep from the traditional model, and what would you change? So that's a really, really great question here, and toward the end. What would you keep and what would you change? So, Kate, maybe for you, as you design your leadership programs, right? Like from scratch, if you had this blank slate, what would you? I love hard questions, so if
Yeah.
yeah,
I think I think a lot of the things that we're talking about right now, I'm thinking about a program that we're already investing in right now that we're getting ready to introduce this fall. And it is a lot about curiosity and critical thinking and being able to frame the right problem. And the program also teaches the importance of understanding your stakeholders and second level ramifications, a lot of things that we're talking about. I think continuing to emphasize that. I think about just the importance of governance and ethics. We have, again, going back, we have way more autonomy and decision-making authority in a lot of places where we didn't before. And so I would say, programs really, really emphasizing that. And
mm,
yeah, those would be a
yeah.
couple.
Yeah, tying back to a lot of the things we talked about, and
Yeah.
critical thinking, and looking at the big picture, and really, I mean, I love the asking why, right? Dean Stokes said, like, just asking one more why after everyone else
Mhm.
stops asking. I think those are the skills that I think any leadership program should have had in the past, but probably are even more important now with, yeah, so much more AI generated confident results that may require another why.
And we're
Makes
getting
sense.
that on the in the higher ed side too. Many of my faculty have returned to oral examinations, one-on-one, professor and student,
Hmm.
like Cambridge Oxford style. And it's always why, the testing the assumptions to make sure that the student, maybe they used a lot of AI to prep for that, but they've got to be able to explain it on their own terms. And I'm finding that really powerful and intriguing. And we're certainly tracking how that's working and changing the learning environment.
Yep.
I
And
love
in
that.
the corporate leadership programs that we design, and in the 12-week MBA, the assessment, it's not a multiple choice assessment. It is a question session with the faculty member, one on one. With a reasonable chance that someone isn't like cheating by reading from a script that AI has on their phone, but also like with that one-on-one questioning. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Uh, we're going to see a lot more blue book exams again, right? And
Mhm.
people
Me
writing in
too.
class.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
had to
I love
budget
that.
for blue books again this year.
I think we see that too in our organization, just the importance at a manager and leader level and how they are kind of going through a similar exercise with their team members to build those skills and to build those abilities that they might have experienced in maybe other kind of traditional programs. So, we were talking a little bit about apprenticeship and the value of, coaching in real time through work. And I just see the manager playing a much more critical role in teaching in real time, not telling, but
Mhm.
really teaching in real time. And so we'll be investing in I think that for our leaders. How do they become better coaches in real time, teachers in real time?
Yeah. And we're in the last minute and we're getting three incredibly great questions. So I'm so sad we have to cut it off here. But yeah, one question is like, what can you do to improve your own business judgment today, right? What can you do starting next week outside of enrolling at St. Edward's University or in our 12-week MBA? What else can we do? I think Kate, you answered that question earlier really well. Like find a mentor that gives you rope, right? Like learn by doing, learn by experience, and if you're in a job where you don't get that, maybe then find a place where you can. And two more amazing questions. I don't know if we have time. Yeah, incredible question, Misty. What are the early warning signs that someone has strong analytical capability but weak judgment? Maybe we'll leave it with that last question. Any 30-second answer to that? What are the early warning signs that someone has strong analytical capabilities but weak judgment? That's a really good
Mm.
question.
I would say being reluctant to take the perspective of others, and
Mhm.
having just a strong conviction on their own outputs or their own analytics. So
Yeah, yeah. Dean Stokes, any?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and just rushes to judgment. That's an early warning sign too, and something that I think many of us continue to work on professionally as well. It's very easy to think you've got all the facts and you understand the situation, but you've got to be patient.
Yeah, I think my answer is in one word, lack of humility, or in three words, lack of humility. I think, especially in today's world where things are changing so fast, anyone that doesn't approach problems with enormous amounts of humility probably lacks the ultimate judgment to make good judgment calls. Misty, we're at the end of time. I think we could talk for another 2 hours here,
Oh my
but
God. Yes, Vishali said we need another hour. Agree. Maybe we'll convince you guys to do a part two. But just wanted to thank you all for joining today. And for our listeners, we'll be sending this recording and the recap out likely tomorrow with all the relevant links and Q&A and takeaway highlights. So thank you. If there's any other questions, feel free to email me and we'll see you next time. Thanks all.
thanks, Misty. Thanks, everyone.